Real Time 1960s presents Evening Report, a complete roundup of today's news with Joe Rubenstein.
Good evening. In Mexico, President Kennedy continues his state visit. In Washington, the Supreme Court makes a controversial ruling. In Israel, a convicted spy seeks asylum. Executions in Cuba, setbacks in South Vietnam, and Sandy Koufax makes history. Those are the headlines. The details after this message.
Coca-Cola gives you that refreshing new feeling. Enjoy ice-cold Coke right now. Get zing, what a feeling with ice-cold Coke right now. Coca-Cola gives you that refreshing new feeling. Zing, what a feeling with the Coke. Ice-cold. Enjoy ice-cold Coke right now.
President Kennedy and Mexican President Adolfo López Mateos wrapped up their talks in Mexico City today with a joint statement of solidarity. The two leaders said that Mr. Kennedy's two-day visit marked a new era of understanding and friendship between Mexico and the United States. To inaugurate this new era, the U.S. will grant Mexico a $20 million loan for land reform. There remained one point of dispute. President Kennedy was unable to convince Mr. López Mateos to oppose Cuba's Fidel Castro. In January, when the U.S. led a majority vote to suspend Cuba from the Organization of American States, Mexico abstained and has continued to maintain diplomatic and trade relations with Cuba. If President Kennedy was disappointed, he certainly didn't show it, as he and the First Lady embarked upon a lightning tour of Mexico City. Mrs. Kennedy delighted local citizens by speaking flawless Spanish. The president, whose Spanish is limited to just a few words, did manage to work one of them in while speaking at a housing development.
Amigos, I have seen in many places a housing which has been developed under governmental influences, but I have never seen any projects in which governments have played their part, which have fountains and statues and grass and trees, which are as important to the concept of the home as the roof itself. And finally, I want to say again the strong impression I have had from this short visit to this city and this country, how strongly your president and the people of Mexico have understood that political freedom, however vital it may be, does not reach its full significance until there is also economic participation in the life of the country by the people themselves.
The final item on the president's itinerary was an advanced July 4th celebration in Mexico City, sponsored by the American Society of Mexico.
Next Wednesday, I am going to Philadelphia to speak on the 4th of July. But I think it's just as appropriate to celebrate the 4th of July here in this city as I do in Philadelphia in the United States. And that is because the people who wrote the Declaration of Independence from the beginning recognized and in their public statements indicated that they were not advancing a theory of government merely for the people of the United States, but for the people around the world. And the heads of state who come year in and year out to Washington, and the 30 or 40 new states which have been formed since the end of World War II, in nearly every case, in their constitutions and their declarations, they have used phrases from our Constitution and our Declaration. So I do not believe that these are phrases to be trotted out on the 4th of July, but they are phrases to work, to implement, and fight for all around the globe every day, particularly in the great decade of the 1960s, which is so critical.
The president returns to Washington tomorrow. On Tuesday, Dr. Robert Soblen, convicted last year of spying for the Soviet Union, jumped a $100,000 bail and fled the United States. The 61-year-old spy, once a respected psychiatrist at Rockland State Hospital in New York, arrived in Tel Aviv late that night aboard an Air France plane carrying the Canadian passport of his dead brother. Dr. Soblen's request for political asylum in Israel was denied. An official there said the government had no intention of allowing Israel to become a haven for Jewish criminals. Dr. Soblen, who provided the Soviets with secret OSS documents during World War II, and then with photographs of a U.S. nuclear testing site in 1950, apparently has no wish to live in the Soviet Union or any other country in the communist bloc. In New York, Ephraim London, Dr. Soblen's attorney, was asked for his views on his client's future prospects.
I think they're rather dim. He doesn't have long going to live at best. He can't escape the prison of his body. He's dying of leukemia, and I'm sure that he doesn't, under the best circumstances, I doubt that he will live more than 2 months or 3.
On Wednesday, after learning of Dr. Soblin's escape, Mr. London had speculated that the former psychiatrist may have lost his mind. Yesterday, Mr. London was asked if he still held that view.
I thought yesterday that he might have been confused, that the use of narcotics to lessen the pain might have had some influence on his thinking. I don't think today that his act of leaving was the act of a confused man. I think that it was calculated. I think it was deliberate.
It is believed that Israel will deport him, perhaps as soon as tomorrow, to Great Britain, which has an extradition treaty with the United States. On Monday, the Supreme Court, by a vote of 6-1, outlawed the reading of an official prayer in New York public schools. Justice Hugo Black, who wrote the opinion, said the reading of the prayer was, quote, an establishment of religion, unquote, forbidden by the First Amendment. The implications of the decision will extend well beyond the New York prayer. A great many public schools in this country, especially in the South, incorporate religious elements in their daily activities, including reading from the Bible. The decision has created a storm of controversy. A Baltimore Sun editorial asked the following questions, quote, does this mean there is to be no more governmentally sponsored religious activity? No more army chaplains? No prayers to open Congress and the Supreme Court itself? No more Thanksgiving proclamations by public officials? No singing of the third stanza of the national anthem in public structures? Are we to have new currency, inscribed in blank we trust, unquote? Former President Herbert Hoover said, quote, the Congress should at once submit an amendment to the Constitution which establishes the right to religious devotion in all governmental agencies, national, state, or local, unquote. Yesterday, Senator James Eastland, chairman of the Judiciary Committee, introduced just such an amendment, scheduling hearings for next week. At his press conference Wednesday, President Kennedy was asked to comment on congressional efforts to counteract or overturn the Supreme Court decision.
Well, I haven't seen the measures in the Congress, and you'd have to make a determination of what the language was and what the effect it would have on the First Amendment. The Supreme Court has made its judgment. A good many people obviously will disagree with it. Others will agree with it. But I think that it is important for us, if we're going to maintain our constitutional principle, that we support Supreme Court decisions even when we may not agree with them. In addition, we have in this case a very easy remedy, and that is to pray ourselves. And I would think that it would be a welcome reminder to every American family that we can pray a good deal more at home, we can attend our churches with a good deal more fidelity, and we can make the true meaning of prayer much more important in the lives of all of our children. That power is very much open to us. And I would hope that as a result of this decision that all American parents will intensify their efforts at home. And the rest of us will support the Constitution and the responsibility of the Supreme Court in interpreting it, which is theirs and given to them by the Constitution.
I'll have more news for you after this message.
At school, Campbell's tomato soup turns cold lunches into hot, nourishing meals. On the job, vegetable beef soup for the hearty, fair, and active fellow needs. At the ball game, hot beef broth takes the bite out of the frosty air. For the warmth of home, away from home, take a vacuum bottle of good, hot Campbell's soup. Good.
Here again, Joe Rubenstein.
Raul Castro, Cuba's armed forces minister, announced today the execution by firing squad of 2 alleged U.S. agents. Fidel Castro's brother said 4 enemy agents had been captured in Oriente province 6 weeks ago, and the 2 who were executed were quote-unquote CIA infiltrators. Mr. Castro said maps displaying military positions and explosives intended to sabotage 2 sugar mills had been found on the captured men. He said the maps were, quote, proof of espionage flights the U.S. constantly carries out over our territory, unquote. Meanwhile, 1,178 men taken prisoner after last year's failed invasion at the Bay of Pigs are being held for ransom by the Castro regime. On April 8th, a Cuban court convicted the prisoners of treason. They were sentenced to 30 years at hard labor unless individual fines ranging from $25,000 to $500,000 were paid. This week, the formation of an American committee to raise $62 million to ransom the prisoners was announced. Among those serving on the committee is Princess Lee Radziwill, President Kennedy's sister-in-law. At his press conference this week, the president was asked about the involvement of his wife's sister in the ransom effort.
Well, I'm not informed about it. She's a British citizen and is free to make a judgment. Anyone who wishes to contribute certainly free to do so, and I certainly sympathize with the basic desire, which is to get a good many hundreds of young men out of prison whose only interest was in freeing their country. So I'm certainly not critical of any efforts. I'm not critical of any efforts that are being made in this field.
Mr. Kennedy was also asked about the activities of a different family member.
Mr. President, there's been considerable criticism of the candidacy of your brother Ted for senator from Massachusetts. It's said that there are going to be too many Kennedys in Washington and that Ted has not demonstrated a capacity for this. Would you comment and tell us whether you think this might be an issue in the fall?
As Ted, my brother, pointed out, there are 9 members of our family. It's a big family. They're all interested in public life. So that in public life is centered in at least the great issues in the United States Capitol. Now, the people of Massachusetts are going to decide this. He had a very vigorously contested convention. He's going to have a primary in September. He'll have a very vigorous fight in November. And I would think the people of Massachusetts can make a judgment as to his qualifications and whether there are too many Kennedys. Now, as far as my own judgment is, aside from the fraternal relationship, I did put him in charge in a very hot of managing my campaign in '58 in Massachusetts. But more important, he was in charge of our Western campaign in the pre-convention period, which was a very intensive campaign, where we secured the support of a good many delegates, and in charge of our campaign in the West in the campaign itself, so that I have confidence in his ability. The people of Massachusetts must make the judgment, however.
In South Vietnam this week, a 3-day government offensive against the Viet Cong in the Mekong Delta, about 50 miles south of Saigon, ended in frustration and failure. Although the operation used several thousand South Vietnamese troops, 30 U.S. Army and Marine Corps helicopters, amphibious troop carriers, and plastic boats, the guerrillas showed once again their almost magical ability to melt into the wilderness within seconds of hearing the approach of mechanized government forces. On the final day of the operation, one South Vietnamese company, using amphibious troop carriers, did not spot a single guerrilla. Casualty figures have not been released, but it is known that 4 government soldiers drowned when their plastic boats capsized. Sports, right after this.
Hey, Massachusetts, Ted fills the bill, and one vote from you sets Kennedy on the hill. A young, strong, and able, fair-minded man. He's ready and willing to fight for you as no other candidate can. So what do you say, mighty Bay State? Let's take the stand. Go all the way, state Kennedy by demand. If you want to be sure that your voice is heard beyond election day, vote correct, elect, he can.
In Los Angeles tonight, 26-year-old Sandy Koufax of the Dodgers pitched the first no-hitter in the National League this year. Koufax fanned 13 in shutting out the New York Mets 5-0 before a spellbound crowd of 29,800. In the first inning, Koufax needed just 9 pitches, all strikes, to put down Richie Ashburn, Rod Kaniel, and Felix Mantilla. This pitching rarity is known as the Immaculate Inning, and Koufax was just the 9th pitcher this century to achieve the feat. As usual with a no-hitter, there was fine defensive work behind the pitcher. Tonight's hero in that department was shortstop Maury Wills, who made a dazzling backhanded stab of a screaming grounder off the bat of Frank Thomas in the second. As the Dodgers offense went to work in the bottom of the 8th, not one teammate sat within 20 feet of Koufax in the dugout. When Jim Gilliam was caught stealing to end the inning, the pitcher's expression remained unchanged as he stalked toward the mound, the picture of determination.
All right, the 9th inning, 5-0 Dodgers, and Koufax has finally come face-to-face with it. The first pinch hitter will be Gene Woodling, a former New York Yankee. So Woodling will bat for Davio.
Koufax later said he was prepared for Mets manager Casey Stengel to send up the right-handed Gil Hodges to pinch hit. Flustered perhaps by the appearance of the left-handed Woodling, the southpaw suffered a brief recurrence of wildness.
3-1 to Woodling. He went 3-2 on all 4 hitters in the 8th inning. 3-1 pitch, fastball low, ball 4, and Woodling is aboard on a walk. And that'll bring up Richie Ashburn, the first time this year that Koufax has walked 5 men in a ballgame.
And so, with a man aboard, Koufax faced 2-time National League batting champion Ashburn, currently hitting .329.
Koufax set, the 1-1 pitch, fastball, line down the left field line, foul. So Ashburn slices one foul down in the left field corner.
Koufax later said that Ashburn's line drive, which fell foul by just a few feet, quote, really put a lump in my stomach.
Now Koufax on the rubbers. The 1-2 pitch to Ashburn. Fastball, a ground ball to Wills. He goes to Burright. They get one. To Harkness, not in time.
And so, with one away, Koufax faced another tough hitter, Rod Kaniel, currently hitting .322.
Sandy straddles the rubber, leans on his right knee, stares into Roseboro. Now he's set, Keneal waiting. Strike 2 pitch. Curveball, a big bouncer to Gilliam. Jim has it, goes to Burright. They get 1, and that's all. 2 out in the 9th inning, and listen to this crowd.
So, with everything on the line, and the power-hitting Frank Thomas looming in the on-deck circle, it all came down to second baseman Felix Mantilla.
Koufax set. And the pitch. Fastball, a big bouncer down to Wills. He has it, goes to Burright, no-hitter. All of the Dodgers are out to mob Koufax, halfway between third and home, and the crowd giving him a standing ovation.
After the game, Koufax called it the biggest thrill of his career, along with 2 others, winning his first Major League game at the age of 19 and fanning 18 San Francisco Giants on August 31st, 1959. As for the Mets, they were duly dazzled by the pitcher's brilliance. Veteran Gene Woodling said, quote, "That fellow really opened my eyes. That first strike he fired at me in the 9th, nobody throws a ball any harder than that," unquote. The Dodgers now trail the first-place Giants by just half a game. In the American League, Cleveland maintains a half-game lead over the Yankees and the Angels, with the Twins a game and a half back. And that, for this evening, completes our look at the latest news on this Saturday, June 30th, 1962. Thank you for joining us, and have a great day tomorrow.
This has been your Evening Report, a roundup of the latest news with Joe Rubenstein.